Hey guys, how's it going? It's Vex, and today I've got a video for you. And normally, what you'll see on this channel, it's either music related or it's live streams in any form, right? I know back in 2010, I did like vlogs and skits and stuff like that, and I didn't really pick that back up when I went to college because I was working on music and I ended up finding a passion in that, and here I am doing this. The thing about this video is that the point is I never just sit down and just have a discussion with you guys as if it's like a vlog and me just talking in a video versus doing a live stream. It's more of, instead of watching the people be active, I make the video and then I upload it and then I wait for responses, that sort of thing. So that feeling, it's slowly coming back because I remember those days. I'm making this video because to me this is a video that needs to be made, and to me it just can't be avoided, and it won't be avoided. I'm going to make this video because the theme of this album is very not safe for work. And on top of that, a lot of people may get this idea that there are some songs that are about them and this and that, and they get this in their head, or like, oh, it's too fucking offensive. This is why I want to make this video. I want to make it for all those people who assume the worst in my product and who assume that things are what they're really not. I'm here to set the record straight and to tell you what this album really is. So that way there's no misinterpretation. There's no miscommunication there. I want everybody to know. I want everybody to know that this is a very not safe for work album. If you listen to this at your job, be very careful of what songs you choose to play at your workplace. I'm just saying. Be very careful. Because yeah, there are some songs on there that you could probably play on the like at work and get away with it, or like wherever you are. Most of the songs on there, however, you probably shouldn't do it, but you're gonna do what you want to do, and I understand that going in. The topic of this album is on the theme of death. It has everything to do with the process of death, what people go through before they die. And on top of that, it even covers things like mental illness, and it covers many of things that people go through that are very hard to deal with. And most people don't want to touch this topic. Most people, whether or not they realize it, have a fear of death. And they have this fear of death because it is inevitable. Because they don't know what's going to happen to them like afterwards. They don't even know if there's an afterlife. They're just hoping for the best. Most of these people, when it comes to death, they don't even know what they're going to do for the families, like when they die. Like what's going to happen. You know? Death is very much, it's a thing that goes on in our lives continuously. Like just the other day, my mom was talking about somebody else who died that we knew, apparently. Like death is always around us. And the thing is, we as a society don't really talk about it like we should. We don't really think about the entirety of the process, right? Because people want to shove their emotions into themselves so they don't have to feel it. They want to push it out, essentially. That's what they want to do. So that way they don't have to think about it. So that way they can't do that. I, however, don't have that luxury. I don't have the luxury of being there and pushing shit out, right? Death has been a part of my life this year in numerous things. I've been to more funerals than I've wanted to in the past 3 years. One. One is too many for me, motherfucker. One is too many. Okay? I don't want to go to more than one funeral. But that's the thing about funerals. Funerals, there's more funerals that happen than weddings do. For whatever reason, that's the reason. But to get back on with the story here, like I said, this album has to deal with the theme of death. It has everything to do with mental illness. It has everything to do with people, how they think, and like what goes through their heads. Especially when they have that feeling like they're dead inside. And it dances around a few topics of death itself, which I'm going to get into like every single track. Every single track I'm going to get into. Because I don't want any of this to be misinterpreted, right? So to explain some other things, The name of this album is The Basement Tapes. This album will be released July 20th, but right now it is available for pre-order. So if you go down in the description, you can go to where the album is and you can go pre-order it. When you pre-order this album, you will get 3 tracks off the album. You'll get the first 3 tracks when you pre-order. You'll get them instantly. But yeah, as I said, it's called The Basement Tapes. July 20th, that's the release date. Down in the description. There you go. So all the proceeds that I get from this album will be going to a nonprofit organization called Bring Change to Mind. Now, Bring Change to Mind is a nonprofit organization dedicated to encouraging dialogue about mental health into raising awareness, understanding, and empathy. The actress and activist Glenn Close, probably know her from 101 Dalmatians. Maybe you've caught her on a guest episode of The Simpsons. Either way, I know who she is. She co-founded Bring Change to Mind in 2010 after her sister, Jessie Close, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and her nephew, Kalen Pick, with schizoaffective disorder. And so every individual who speaks out inspires another and another. And that's how they'll end the stigma around mental illness. That's how we'll, as they say, bring change to mind. So I would be grateful if you guys wanted to purchase it. If not, that's cool too. You can always rip it however you want. Just like with any other album. It'll be available on YouTube. So, you know, I don't blame you if you don't want to pay for it, you know. But just know that if you buy that album exclusively on my Bandcamp, all proceeds will go to Bring Change to Mind. And in the event that Bring Change to Mind is no longer there, we will find another charity. This album that I have made, I've spent at least a good month or so on it. Probably closer to 2 months, I guess. And the thing about this album is it started off about a month or 2 ago. Yeah, 2 months ago to be exact, when my girlfriend's son got run over by a truck. The dude was coming in fast, didn't know or didn't see the kid there in the yard, and he just run over him. And that really fucked me up. It did a number on me, and I wasn't really active for about a week or 2 on the internet. I was slowly coming around, and I wanted to make a song that was based on that child's death. And at the time, I did not have any inspiration for that. There was nowhere I could really go with it. I was in some streams with some people, and the topic of death started creeping up, and this was like probably about 2 weeks after the fucking death of the child. People were talking to me about like death and with school shootings and shit. They were like, especially Columbine. Columbine was probably the most talked about out of any of that, and it was at that point where death just kept throwing itself in my face. It just, like, people would just keep talking about it, and it would never stop after that child. Everybody was just fucking talking about death, and I was just wanting to get over this shit. I didn't want to talk about death. But when there's something that just keeps creeping at you, that just keeps popping up in your face like that, I'm not going to not talk about it. Now I kind of do have to, because it's a problem that I want to confront. But yeah, going back to the tracks on there. I got the idea for it because I was sitting around one day and I thought about the Basement Tapes. Because the Basement Tapes was a thing that Eric and Dylan, which were the Columbine shooters back in 1999, April 20th to be exact, they had basement tapes. And I also heard about 13 Reasons Why. Never watched the show in my life. Still haven't. I might get to it, might not, whatever. But the point is, I like the idea of the basement tapes. Because the basement tapes was like a sort of confession that people did to explain their process in death before they actually went and did it. And I like the idea of that. And I was like, you know what? I can create my own fucking basement tapes right here. But this is why I have to sit here and explain this to you guys. Because these are not literal basement tapes. And I want to make damn sure you know that. These are not literal basement tapes. These are just songs. But it's a concept album. It's a concept album off of basement tapes. And it's a concept album based on death. And I liked how I was able to incorporate the two together to make something beautiful as I have. In this album, I thought I was going to go in it making like the most suicidal shit or some of the most depressing shit that I could. But it turned out to be a really beautiful album in my opinion, and you really wouldn't know the difference. Other than the fact that there's at least 4 to 5 songs on the album where it includes me singing to some degree, whether it be rapping or actual singing. I actually sing, legit sing, on this album, which it's not a common thing on Vexler. That's not something that happens for me. And now I'm starting to get a little more comfortable about that, and I'm starting to play around with that, right? So that's helped a little bit. But yeah, that's why I'm having to talk about this, because these are not literal basement tapes. When this is released, I'm not going to like off myself or anything. I'm not going to like go up and shoot up anybody. That's not what this is, and I want to make that perfectly clear. That is not what this is. I'm not doing that. It is just a concept, and it is a concept for this album. And that's why I have to make this clear, because somebody is going to go out there and they're going to misinterpret what I'm saying here. So I'm going to go through the songs one by one and kind of give you an idea and kind of give you like what this is about. So what this is about is that this is about a fictional character that they have these basement tapes. Somebody pops in a basement tape, and that is like the first basement tape that they watch, or that they listen to, rather. I mean, because it's a music album. Like, what are you going to watch, really? You know? But they pop it in, they listen to it. And it's the fact of this person is talking about how people have been giving them shit for years and doing this and doing that. And then they go and they actually record themselves doing the fucking crime. And then they go and they off themselves. But that is like what's happening in the moment. Because almost every track after that, like the beginning of the album does not start until track number 2. That is what I'm trying to get at. Because they did the tapes and, you know, got their story recorded and done and stuff. And that was when it was actually happening. And then the next track, they're like, well, let me tell you about how we got to this point. And then from that point on, every track just about is telling you how they got to that point. And then once they get to the third to the last song is when they finally find out what led to this. They finally found out how this came about. And then for this fictional character, they have this funeral for him, and that's a song that plays at the funeral. And then at the same time, the last track on there, it's an alternative to what's, well, not really an alternative. It's what's going on simultaneously to what's going on at the funeral. So let me go ahead and explain more in depth about the songs now that I've explained more of a synopsis on this. So the basement tapes. The basement tapes was based on the Columbine shit. The thing about the basement tapes that is very special about it is that it's what kickstarts the album, really, because it's almost like you're listening to my old styles again, just about, really. But it's like, you know, as I said before, you pop in the tape, you listen to what they have to say, and you listen to the pressures that were on them, and then they just go and shoot up shit. And they basically played the Grim Reaper in this because they think they're godlike. But what they really are is they're just wannabe Grim Reapers. And in saying that, I'm specifically talking about a fictional character for this album. It's like they've done their own shit. But the song was based on the Columbine incident. But in the album, it's a fictional character. And so they pop in the next tape, and it's what's led up to that last moment. See, the basement tapes is the last moment. It's not how it started. It's the last moments of how they went out. So that's basement tapes. The second track you get to is called Mr. Reaper. And so this kind of plays off with, again, with them like doing all these killings and shit, right? Because that's what happened in the basement tapes. That's what this character was most known for. This fictional character went and shot up people, and he was being the Grim Reaper. And the underlying theme of this track is you reap what you sow. And so basically he's coming to collect souls. He's coming to collect bodies. And that's why I made the song, essentially. Which, you know, it's like this character makes these basement tapes, and it's like, oh yeah, I did all these things, and now I'm going to do my last number, sort of thing, right? And so No One Lives Forever is a cover that I did of Oingo Boingo's song by the same name. I love the shit out of that song. And it kind of plays off of Mr. Reaper because of, like, the Grim Reaper keeps coming after me, but he can't get me. But it's kind of more like one of those fortune-telling tracks where it's telling Mr. Reaper, which is what this dude calls himself. It's like the fortune cookie is telling Mr. Reaper that no one lives forever. You will be caught. I've seen what you've done. You're taking my job. And now I'm going to collect on you. And that's what leads into Hangin'. Now, Hangin' is the fourth track on the album, which is slightly based on the Caitlin Davis incident, where Mr. Reaper, he's and I think that's what I'll call this fictional character, I'll call him Mr. Reaper, because that's what he thinks he is. So Mr. Reaper is going and walking down the street, and all that he's seeing is a bunch of fucking dead bodies hanging. And he looks at their phones, he looks at, like, pretenses and, like, what's happened before then, and it shocks the shit out of him. And one of the underlying causes, or not causes, the underlying message in this is, give enough rope and they'll hang themselves. That's the message I was coming across with that. You give yourself enough rope and you'll hang yourself. Because that's what he's doing. He's getting himself into enough trouble that it's eventually going to come back on him, and it's going to hang him, right? You know, and that was kind of the same thing with Caitlin Davis, really. They kept pushing at her. They kept pushing at her. They kept giving her enough rope. They kept giving her inch by inch, and then during her last moments, she had enough rope, and she hung herself. I mean, and now you see why I can't exactly just say, well, you can listen to this anywhere, because you can't. You either need to listen to this by yourself, or you need to listen to it with people who think alike, who aren't going to flip out on this shit, and who's not sensitive to this topic. But eventually, in the song, Mr. Reaper gets hunted down by the real Grim Reaper, and ends up temporarily getting away and hanging the Grim Reaper himself while Mr. Reaper runs off. And so temporarily he's safe, but eventually the Grim Reaper will come back for him. And that's just like one of many attempts. Stains and Blades was an interesting title. I had held on to it for years. After someone I was dating, I had heard that they cut themselves and that they did this and that to themselves. And it was originally a different idea at the time. I didn't really go through with that idea. And I was like, well, I got a really good song for it, but I'll just use this name instead. And when you listen to the song, it's all instrumental, but it's like imagining the process that somebody has to go through when they decide they want to cut themselves, right? Because that's not really something you should be doing. I don't encourage that to anybody, and I don't condone that sort of behavior. But this is one of those things that, in order to understand what someone goes through, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to paint this picture. I'm trying to paint this narrative of, like, the act of what's going on. Because in Mr. Reaper's mind, he's been under so much stress because he's shot up people for so long, and he's made a name for himself, right? And then after the Grim Reaper incident, he's all nervous. He's very depressive because shit's going downhill in his life. He doesn't really have anybody in his life. Doesn't really have any friends. More than likely, doesn't have a girlfriend. He's just a person that's there that has to live out life just because. And there's no real reward for him at the end of the day. And it's because of the shit that he's done to people. And again, Mr. Reaper is a fictional character. Fictional character. Okay. Alright, so opioids. Opioids is the most schizophrenic shit I have written for this album. It has got to be the most schizophrenic shit I've written for it. Because the thing about opioids is, opioids makes you feel good and makes you feel high, and a lot of people say that you know, it basically acts like morphine, right? And it acts like fucking drugs in that sort of sense. And what happens when you're on those sort of drugs? You're on a fucking high. You're very manic. And like I've heard people like slamming their their hands through doors and shit just for the relief, especially when they have to be taken off of opioids. That is not a fun process for anybody. But that's what Mr. Reaper went to when he wasn't getting released endorphins from cutting himself in stains and blades. He went to opioids because he thought it would settle his pain. Dead inside. A lot of people, like, this one is probably the most relatable to most people because dead inside is something that a lot of us say all the time. We're dead inside and there's shit that just kind of goes on. I don't want to be here, but it's only temporary thoughts. And so that's the thoughts that are occurring to his head at that moment, is that he's dead inside. And at one moment he's debating, Mr. Reaper is debating on whether or not he wants to be dead. Which goes into Wished I Was Dead, which was a recently made song. That was one of the two songs that was the last to be made for this album. Which I'm glad I went back and added 2 more songs because it completed the entire story for this. Wished I Was Dead is a cover that I did of EMH's song by the same name. And yeah, that was the thing about that. It was like, after taking all the opioids and having these feelings or whatever, Mr. Reaper is like, yeah, I wish I was dead. Like, that's not something that I'm going to get over. And that was his thought process in the story, was that it's not going to get any better. I wished I was dead. And, like, he does all this shit, and, like, he starts having these thoughts about, like, oh, I imagine myself hanging 5 feet from the floor. You know, that kind of sounds familiar from Hanging. And that's because, you know, you can't really tell at that point what is a... Like you can't tell if he's being delusional. You can't tell if he's having thoughts from before. You can't even tell if Hanging was before or after Wished I Was Dead. That is at that state that he's getting to. It's that state of just, you don't care anymore, right? And then it gets into Run Me Over, which was the song about the poor child that I knew that got run over. And at that point, I thought that was going to be one of the last songs that was made for it before the last 2 songs on this album. But I had a thought for it, and I went with it, and I really liked where it was going. Other people did too, and I stuck with it, you know. So Run Me Over was one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna make it, but I know you will. I just run me over. And like, that was his thought process. It went into whether the Grim Reaper was going to get him for his actions, or whether he was going to get him for his abuse of medicine and cutting himself and this and that. His own mind was going to spiral him down into wanting to end his life, which is where we come to the tape before the Basement Tapes. And if you listen to these songs out of order, then Martyr is like technically would be the last Basement Tape, so to speak. Because Martyr, this one was probably the only love, it was the only love track I did on this one. But it was like, in the sense, he kind of tells this story to people where he ended up being the martyr. He ended up dying for her love. And that's what it came down to. This was a song that Mr. Reaper would have written before he did what he did in the Basement Tapes. Was he wrote a song about this girl that he liked, and he went to her grave at least once a week, probably sometimes even 2 or 3 times a week. It would depend. And they would go and have chats, and then he found out, oh, well, you didn't show up today, and I wonder why. And so he gets all these thoughts, and he's like, well, if I'm dead, then I can be with her. Because essentially, he's at that schizophrenic level now, where he believes that he's talking to a ghost. Or he believes he's talking to a real person, but it's actually a ghost that he's talking to. And then he ends up ending his life so that way he could be with her. And then have whatever conversations they wanted. And then the last one, even though it's the first song on the track, would be the Basement Tapes. And it would go back into, I did all this shit and everything. And then, eventually he offed himself as a result. And then Requiem is the song that would play at Mr. Reaper's funeral as a sort of a tribute. Which is the meaning of Requiem in itself. Is it's a piece that you would make, especially back in classical times, classical music times, where like people would write pieces specifically for them. Like Requiem is just about the same thing as saying a tribute song to them, but it's a tribute for the dead is what it is. And while that's going on, the afterlife is simultaneously going on, because he's getting to experience what the afterlife is and what it's like. He's experiencing every bit of that for what it is. And so now I've explained all the tracks on there. I've worked very hard on this album. This album gives my career the most meaning. It is a very personal album to me now. And I'm glad that I went through with the album, and I'm glad that I went about it the way that I did. I think had I went about it any other way, I don't think it would have did it justice. The way I did it, in my mind, completely frees me. I've confronted death, and I understand that it's an inevitable thing that everyone is going to go through. And while I'm still somewhat afraid of death to a degree, at least I understand. At least I understand what people kind of go through. At least whatever feelings I had came out in terms of death. Whether it be for good or for bad, this video has to go up, and so does the album. And if something should happen to me, I've got sources that will upload this. They'll upload all of it as a legacy. But nothing should happen to me. I don't believe anything is going to. I believe everything will continue as is. But if I didn't explain the album, I'm sure you would see why people would have a problem with this album. If I didn't just explain it. Because a lot of people would be like, oh yeah, this dude's got like suicidal tendencies. Ooh, yeah, he's making all these, he's making fucking suicide songs and talking about hanging people and shit. Dude, no. No fucking way. No, that's not the, it's not the point. This is a concept album. Like, that's what it is at the end of the day. It's a concept album. And it surrounds itself with the theme of death. And I guess this is a bit cathartic for me, in a way. Not necessarily this video, but the album is a bit cathartic for me. Because I never thought... listen, if you was to ask me back in 2012, when I first made an album, if you would have asked me if I was ever going to make a death album, I would have said, fuck no. I would have even said that I couldn't even curse, much less say shit like that. And here I am in 2018, this is 6 years later, and I'm free to say whatever the fuck I want on my shit. And I do it. 2018 me versus 2012 me, that would be something else. I think. Really, I'm just I'm really happy things are coming along, and I'm really liking the reception on the album so far. I'm glad that people are taking it the way that they are, and especially with them having an understanding of the album, and that really goes a long way. And in saying all that, I don't think there's anything else I really need to include. Guys, follow me on Twitter. That link's in the description as well. I'm very active on Twitter. You can also go to my Discord. You can always hit me up on Discord. I'm always active there too. Those are like two of the most active places that I am at. So if you have any questions, want to talk about something, hit me up. We'll talk about it. And if it's about the album, we'll talk about it. So yeah, anyways, thank you all for watching this video. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a bell down there when you subscribe to me. By the way, there's also a subscribe button if you'll just hit that subscribe button, and then you'll also hit that bell so that way you get all my notifications when I go live, when I post a new video. Like, you'll fucking get it in your emails. You'll get a notification on YouTube saying that I've uploaded something, I've done something, I'm going live. Do that shit for me. That would help me out tremendously. That way, you guys, if you enjoy my content, you can always go and watch it. Anyways, until next time, this has been Vexler, and yeah, I'll talk with you guys later. Basement tapes down in the description, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.